Welcome to the Pronunciation Pro webinar today. We are doing our bi-monthly Practice With Me webinar, which basically is for students of and members of Pronunciation Pro. Anyone who's a member, has a membership to Pronunciation Pro, can attend these webinars, whether you're in the basic package, just the monthly $19.97 a month package, or whether you are doing our top level premier package where you work one-on-one with our trainers. At any point, any membership level, you're able to come to these webinars and ask questions and get feedback and work with me. I do these every other week to make sure that you have the support that you need as you're going through the video course. There's a lot of material to cover. There's a lot to understand in the Pronunciation Pro course, both in our 12-week program and in our alumni course. The alumni course starts after the 12-week program ends, and there's about 40 weeks after that of content that you get every week that just builds on what you've been learning. English pronunciation and fluency, really getting really good. It takes time and it takes practice, and it's something that the students that I have that have the mindset going into it that I'm not looking to learn this all in just a few weeks. I'm looking to have a proven system where I can follow step by step, week by week, put in the time, and I will, I will in 3 months, in 4 months, 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, I will see a huge difference, a life-changing difference in the way that I speak English because of that step by step, every day just doing a little bit to help improve. So the Pronunciation Pro program is wonderful for that. It's a proven system, and just follow step by step and you'll be able to get some amazing results from it. Now, the support that we give varies depending on the membership level. So with the basic membership, you get these webinars, you get access, we'll answer questions through kind of the comments section and things like that. And then the plus package, you get weekly feedback for those 12 weeks. So you'll get 12 feedbacks, 12 different times throughout the course. You'll get personalized instruction from your trainer based on those assignments that you submit. So that's a really great way to get that personalized attention. And then our premier package, you actually meet with one of our trainers weekly and get an hour's worth of training. In addition to all of the videos and everything that you're learning, you'll get that hour feedback, okay? So depending on really budget and time are the biggest constraints in which package you decide on. But whatever package you're doing, commit to it and following through with that, with what is designed in that package, and you'll be able to get some great results. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and get into it. I just always share a little picture, but my name is Annie Rudin. I'm a speech language pathologist by trade, and have been working in doing accent training since my oldest was before he was even born. So just started my own business here doing accent training when before I had him, and we just celebrated his 8th birthday this week. So I've been doing it for a long time and love what I do, love the clients I'm working with, because you all are all so motivated and so ambitious, and you are ready to tackle something that is very challenging, which is language learning, and working on perfecting that. And I love that, and I love that attitude and that drive. So that's what makes it so great. So this is my husband, and then I have 3 little boys, and I have a 4th little boy on the way. He'll be joining our family in November. So we're excited about that. Okay, so let's go into the first question. Gianluca This is from you, and I don't see you on the webinar yet today, but maybe you'll show up later, or can't, and we'll just look at the recording, which is just fine. Gianluca had a question about some words that start with E, but wondering how the pronunciation is for those. So words like exception. And it was an interesting question because I looked at these words, and there are some different situations that come up when E is at the beginning of the word, and how it changes the pronunciation of it. Okay, so when we have EX, here's what happens. There's kind of this, we talked about voiced and voiceless sounds, and how that affects things. So when you learn about the past tense ed ending, we always look at, is the root word end in a voiced or a voiceless sound? And that affects how we change the ending. There's other situations based on voiced and voiceless sounds on endings of words. Kind of, do we elongate that vowel before the ending voiced sound? So there are a number of different pronunciation rules that are dependent on understanding voiced and voiceless. So here is one of them. So I'm going to kind of pull up some of these that have X at the beginning. So if you see here, we have exception. Right here is exception. So it has kind of that K, that voiceless K sound, because there's a voiceless sound that comes right after. Exception. So it kind of keeps that voiceless quality. So if you have E, X, and then a voiceless sound after it, it's going to have this K, exception. Express, X. And the X has that KS, when the next word is voiceless. So P is voiceless, so we're going to carry that voiceless, express. Extreme is another example. T, extreme, T has a voiceless sound, so it's going to get that X, okay? Now let's contrast that with when we have EX and then a voiced sound after it. Remember, all vowels are voiced, and then you have voiced consonants like G, Z, B. All those that have that voice on are then going to be those voiced sounds. So when you have EX and then a voiced sound after it, it's going to kind of create this voiced quality to the X. So example. Do you hear how it changes that from X to eggs? Example. So that's kind of the trick with that EX, is what comes after it. And how then can we, do we do a voiced K sound for that X, or do we do a voiceless K sound or a voiced G sound? Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And as you come across those X words, that you have a little bit of a strategy there to help you be able to get those. Does anybody want to volunteer to read through these, and so I can kind of check on kind of that voice, if you're able to get that voice on or off, depending on the kind of word it is. If you're wanting to volunteer, and I hope you do, there's like a raise hand icon, or you can write it in the questions box. Anybody want to try this? Okay. Let's see. You're going to have to tell me how to pronounce your name, but Aobakwi? You there?
Nah, you can just call. Yeah, I'm here. You can just call me AB to cut
AB.
the long story short.
Okay.
Yep.
Good,
That's
AB. Thank you. Okay, AB, let's go ahead and tell me a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? And are you in the States, or are you somewhere else?
Nah, I'm not in the US.
Okay.
I'm in Africa.
Oh,
in
great.
South Africa. Yep.
Excellent.
Yeah, I
Okay.
work in a mine. I work in a mine.
Oh,
I
okay.
work as a mine surveyor. I work in one of the largest diamond mine in the world.
Oh, okay. Excellent.
So I've
Excellent.
seen your course online, and I was a bit interested.
Excellent. So what week of the program are you
Hope
in right now?
I'm supposed to be at week 12, but I'm running behind schedule.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well,
So
that tends to happen
yep.
sometimes, but as long as you kind of can stay as consistent as possible, that's what will make the biggest difference. Okay. Well, good. I'm glad to have you in the program. Glad you're here at the webinars. I think that's a big step in just kind of furthering your understanding and your progress. All right.
My pleasure.
All right, Avi, let's go. Let's go ahead and say these words for me.
Exception.
Exception, and I bolded the second syllable because that's the stressed syllable. So yeah, exception.
Exception.
Good. So let's put it in a sentence. That's the exception, not the rule. Can you say that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which
say
one?
that for.
Express.
Yeah, that's an expression. Say that.
Express.
So do you say this sentence for
Express.
me? Say this sentence for me. That's the exception, not the rule.
That's the exception, not the rule.
Good, good. Okay, express.
Express.
Yep, good. So you're getting that voiceless quality. We took the express
Yep.
train at
You know,
midnight.
I'm struggling. I'm
Yeah,
struggling. I'm struggling with the R.
the
R.
R. Okay. Okay, so let's talk
Yeah,
about the
but I
R
hope
for a
I'll get
second.
there. Yep.
Yeah, so let's talk about the R just for a second. What I'm hearing is more of a what we call a trilled R or a rolled R. So express, where it kind of rolls a little bit. So we want to flatten that R back down. Express. Do that for me. Express.
Express.
There you go.
Express.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. Okay, so that's exactly the
Uh-huh.
R that we want to hear. Is just as you come bring your tongue down, then it kind of calms that R sound and it makes it more of an American
All right.
R. Okay, here, do this for me. Example.
Example.
Good. So you're getting that,
Example.
yeah, that example, that voiced quality on the end. Okay, good.
All right.
So we
Yeah.
can come back to, let me just kind of write that down. And as we're going through, after we kind of go through these first questions, we can come back and do some R exercises together, okay? During this
All right.
webinar.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, so we'll do that
Not a
together.
problem. All right.
Thanks, Avi.
Cheers. No, thanks.
All right, excellent. Okay, so let's go through the next part of this, and let me kind of give the explanation. So now we have, those E sounds, and some of them are going to be pronounced as and some are not, are more like an E. Okay, so let me explain here. Escape tends to be more of that sound at the beginning. It wouldn't be escape. That doesn't happen very often in American English. Or especially, we would do especially. And the trick is where a lot of times where the stressed syllable is. Escape is second syllable. Especially, second syllable. Emotional. So this one's an exception. This one's kind of an exception here. We do more of an E sound here. Emotional. And actually, I was doing a little bit of research on this, but now as I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking it has more to do with that voiced and voiceless quality or sound that comes after it. So I'm trying to think, and if any of you can think of another word that kind of starts with more of that E sound. So emotional, emotion, eclipse. So that doesn't quite work with the voiced and voiceless. Eclipse. So I'll have to do a little bit more eventually. Good. Faye. Good. Eventually. So there is, eclipse kind of goes against my idea of whether, it's affected by that voice quality, because emotional has that voiced M at the end, whereas these especially has that voiceless S at the, after it. So I'll have to do a little bit more research on that one to see why it is that, what's causing that to be more of an E sound instead of the sound. Most of the time it's going to be escape, especially, gosh, I'm going to have a hard time. Equipment. Okay, Faye's giving me some good examples. Equipment. So that wouldn't follow that rule either. Equipment, emotional, eventually, those have those E sounds to it. So I'll have to put together maybe a worksheet that has those words that start with E, that start with more of an E sound instead of an sound. But I have to address the question. It's never going to be more of an I sound. We don't want it to be an I. And maybe that's what he meant is it's more of an E sound than Okay. Emoji. There you go. There's another word that starts with E. Emoji. And that again has that voiceless M or voiced M after it. Emotion, emoji, exaggerated is more of an exaggerated. Eternal is a good E sound. Okay, good. So there's a lot of examples there of more of that E sound than the eh. Let's see. We have a question. So Tim is asking equability. Let's see, Tim, I'm going to unmute you here. Tim, you there? Tim, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. So this word equability.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one would be have that equability, has that EQ. So Q says qua, right? Equa. So we're going to do that has more of an sound to it. Equability.
Short I, not EI, just short I.
So it would be more of the short E, yeah. Just like bed.
Bed, or
Let, yeah. Equability. Okay. Whereas equal is going to have that long E. So if we have equal, it's very, these are going to be equal, whereas equability, because the stress is different, it's going to change that first E to be more of a reduced vowel. Okay?
Okay, thank you.
All right, good. Thanks, Tim. Exaggerated. So Rania is saying exaggerated. That follows that same as example. Exaggerated. And equipment is going to have that longer E. Equipment. Good. Equipment. Equipment. Okay. So let me do a little bit more research on that one, because that is something that probably comes up quite a bit. Is what comes for what sound is that E is supposed to be doing? So there's a very predictable pattern with the EX, but it doesn't seem like there's a right at the get-go a predictable pattern with the rest of them. But I have found that in the past that where I haven't been able to see a trend, if I research it a little bit more, I'm able to see a little bit more of a pattern there. So Rania is asking, P in equipment is silent, right? Okay, so equipment And Rania, I'm going to go ahead and unmute you. Rania, are you there?
Hi, Annie. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? Good.
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
Good. You bring up a good point with equipment. Okay, so P and M, it kind of comes down to some of those that linking issue is when we have sounds in the same position as each other.
Yeah.
P and M, are lip sounds. And so what happens is I don't say equipment. I don't completely drop that P, but I bring my lips together and then I move it into the M. Equipment. Yeah. Equipment.
Release it in M.
Yeah, so that
Okay.
P, there's kind of a slight, the slightest of pause to give that P some credit.
Okay.
Equipment. Go ahead and say that for me.
Equipment.
Equipment. Good.
Equipment.
And then do your two other exaggerated and let's see. I think that exaggerated was the other one. Exaggerated.
Exaggerated.
Yeah, good.
Exaggerated. Equipment.
Excellent. Good examples. Thank you. All right, good. Okay, so emergency. Here's another one that has that. So this one I've actually heard both ways. Emergency and it's an emergency. So emergency room, emergency, it's an emergency room, or emergency room. Okay, so that one kind of can get both. E or a. Okay, moving on. And actually, did anybody else want to try all of these? Any volunteers? Anybody wants to go through these words and practice them? I didn't give you guys a chance. So if you want to, go ahead and raise your hand there. Okay, no takers. Okay, so Anderson, I see you're here. So you had a question about two different words that you're having a hard time telling difference between. So Anderson, you there? Anderson? Okay, let's see. You might be okay. Anderson's there, but it sounds like your microphone might not be working quite right. So I'm going to leave you unmuted, so that you can maybe fiddle with that microphone. Okay, so maybe we can do this because it's more of a listening quiz. So Anderson is wondering. He said I can't hear the difference between these two words, then and them. Okay, so what I wanted to do is do some listening exercises between the two. So if your microphone's not working, that's right. Let's just use the questions box. And we'll do first word, second word. Okay, so I'm going to say a word, and I want you to tell me, am I saying the first word or the second word? Okay, and we're going to go through kind of a listening practice to figure out, okay, what sound is that? Okay, okay, so before I do that, let me try to just explain the difference between these two different sounds. So N and M are both nasal sounds. So what that means is that the airflow is going to come through our nose instead of our mouth. So if you think of it as like wah, 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 like a wah, W sound, wah, 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 the sound is coming through our mouth, or you know, that H sound, that sound is coming through the mouth. Well, with N and M, we're closing off our mouth and putting our tongue and our mouth in a certain way that causes the airflow to come through our nose. Okay, so these are called nasal sounds because of that quality. So if you do the N sound, this first sound, your tongue is coming up and closing off the roof of your mouth and closing off that airflow right behind your front teeth. Okay, the M sound is doing the same thing, but it's closing out the mouth. So it makes sense that you would have a hard time hearing the difference because one is One is mm, mm. Okay, so just a slight difference in the mouth position, but because of that difference with the mouth position, there's going to be a slightly different sound that's created. Okay, so Anderson, let's go through the listening quiz, and I'm going to go ahead and say one of these, and I want you to write down first or second, and all of you can do this. If you have a hard time hearing the difference between the two, or you just want to try it out, go ahead and write it in the questions box. Okay, so number one, and I'm going to cover my mouth so that you don't just look at the mouth position, but you can really hear it, because that's the trick. With any of the listening quizzes, I want you to really be training your ear to hear these things. Okay? Them, them, them. Good. Okay, so that's the second word, them. Okay, how about this one? Then, then, then. Okay, so Anderson, you're saying them, second word, and I actually said then, then, then. Okay, so there is something there. So let me contrast the two and put them right next to each other, Anderson, so that you can hear them together. And I'm going to close my mouth, just listen for these. So I'll kind of use the pointer to kind of show you which one I'm saying, and then so that you can kind of start to hear that difference. Then, them, then, them, then, them, then, them. Okay, so Anderson, were you able to hear, and you can just type it in, were you able to hear a difference when they were right next to each other? Okay, so so Anderson's saying, I think I got it. You're able to hear that difference. Let's do that listening quiz again then. Okay, ready? Then, then, then. Okay, so yeah, that was the first one. Then. All right. All right, let's do then, then, then. Okay, so that one was actually the first one, then. So I did the first one again, then, then. So let me contrast those again, Anderson. Then, them, then, them, then, them, then, them, then, them. Okay? All right, let's do that listening quiz one more time. Ready? Them, them, them. Okay, so that one was actually the second one, them, them. Okay, instead of the first, that was, second one. So then, them, then, them. So how then should we get to the party? Help them get to the party. How then will we get to the party? Help them get to the party. Let's see. I know it's frustrating sometimes. Okay, so I'm going to send you a recording of those two and just record myself saying the two so that you can kind of get a little bit more practice with that contrast, and then I'll do a little bit of a listening quiz for you so that you can get just more practice there. Be aware of that mouth position, and we'll just keep training that ear, okay? All right, so, but that's that exercise that we just did, that can be used for any two words that you have a hard time, hearing the difference between. Okay, so it really can be used for any words. Contrasting them and putting them right next to each other and kind of saying, okay, what's the difference between these two? Have a native speaker kind of say them right next to each other and see if you can kind of hear the difference there. Or, if you're working with our trainers, that's a great one for them, for them to know about. If you're like, I really have a hard time between these words, anytime we're at these webinars are excellent too. Okay. Okay, so before we get into, I'm going to do some practice with rhythm, but before we do that, there were just a couple of questions that I want to address. So let me jump into let's see. I'm going to pull up our workbook here. Let me make sure I didn't mess anything up. Okay, is everybody seeing our workbook? So student pronunciation pro student workbook. And I always get this question, so I'll just address it now, is that if you have a yearly membership, so the basic yearly, the plus, or the premier package, I can send you this full PDF, and it just has all of the worksheets that you get for the 12-week program all in just one document. Otherwise, they're all there in the program. They're just broken up into week by week. Okay, so what we're going to do, and I'm actually going to pull up, I usually have this before, but let's pull up, sorry, give me just a second. I'm going to pull up just a blank worksheet for us to use together. So I can scribble all over it and we can work on it together. Okay, so the questions that were asked, let's see, Tim, you had a question about, that didn't come up. So we're actually going to just scribble on this page if you guys don't mind. Okay, so Tim, you had questions about this, these, those, and that, kind of the pronunciation of those. So let's go over it. Tim, you there?
Yeah.
Okay, so what part of these words are tricky for you? Is it the TH sound or the vowels?
Wow.
Okay, the vowels. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through these. Okay, so this, these, those, and that. So this has the sound. So say that for me. This.
Well, I checked my dictionary and said this, not this, this.
So more of like an sound. This.
Yes.
Okay. Which dictionary is that?
Chinese English dictionary.
And it might be that they're using the International Phonetic Alphabet. I'm trying to remember. So I've made some modifications over the years.
But in Chinese and English, they sound this.
So it's the
this.
same sound as fish and hit and some of those this, because when we have so let me think, it was this that you were thinking it was this. So that's not a typical American pronunciation of this word. It's more of that short I.
Before I say this, my teacher said this not correct. I will say this.
This. Okay. This. So yeah, because that's more of like this. And that wouldn't be a typical pronunciation for an American speaker. I'm curious if it would be for maybe British or something like that, but not for the American accent.
Okay.
Okay. So these then has that long E. These.
These.
Good. And then those has the long O. Those.
Those.
Uh-huh. And then that has that short that.
And that.
Uh-huh. So go through all those for me.
This. These. Those. That.
Good. And the one that gets confused quite a bit is this and these, just because of those two vowels and making sure that there's the I and there's the E. This and these. This and these.
This. This. No, this. These.
Okay, and make sure you're getting that TH sound and not the Z. We don't want the Z at the end, at the beginning. So this and these.
This. These.
Okay, so for these, get that tongue between your teeth. These.
These.
There you go. Yep. These.
These.
Yep. Because once that tongue slips back behind, it starts sounding like a Z. But but if it's between the teeth, then it stays that TH sound. Such a subtle difference, but native speakers will notice it. Okay?
Yes.
All right, good. Thanks, Tim. Excellent. Okay, so let's okay, Faye, I'll send you a workbook. Actually, Faye, after the webinar, just right now, you could send me an email just saying, "Hey, will you send me the workbook?" That's an easier one, and then I'll just respond to it. Okay, so Finn, you had a question about why do we say semi instead of different when we pronounce semifinals? I heard it on the Olympic TV recently. So yeah, we've got the Olympics going on. Who else is like attached to their TV at night? We've been watching it every night, falling asleep on the couch to it. It's been wonderful. It's been so fun to see. Okay, so semifinals and semifinals, right? There's those two pronunciations of that. Let's see. Let me unmute you. So Finn, you there? Let's see if your microphone's working. Finn, you there? Okay, so I'll leave his unmuted just for now until we can get that worked out. But Finn is wondering about, okay, on the Olympics, they're talking about the semifinals or the semifinals and the way that those are pronounced. And really, it's one of those words that is just, there's two different ways of pronouncing it. It depends. I'm sure it has to do with more of a regional thing and who's pronouncing it. But both are very acceptable. So semi finals and semi with that long I finals, semifinals. Does anybody want to try saying those for me? Oh, Finn's saying he doesn't have a mic. That's fine. Okay, but that's a good question. And that's what's interesting is I've been watching the Olympics and watching kind of the newscasters, and if there's newscasters that are from different areas, there will be some different pronunciations of some specific words. So there is some regional differences. If it's a British English versus an American English, of course, there's going to be differences mostly in the R's and the vowels with British English. So very interesting to kind of see the contrast there and kind of see some of these differences in the semifinals and semifinals. What I love about that, Finn, is that you're noticing those differences. So what that tells me is when you're starting to kind of clue in to like some of these differences of well, they said it this way and then they said it this way, that is exciting to me because it tells me that you're hearing those very subtle differences in the English language. So those subtle differences in the sounds. And that's why we work on the listening quizzes and work on kind of hearing so much at the beginning of the course, we really want to start hearing those sounds and hearing the differences in those sounds and just bring that awareness to all of these little subtleties of American English. Because as you then move on and as you start kind of listening more, it's like, oh, I never noticed that before, but now I'm hearing that they're saying those two different things differently, or that they're stressing these words and things like that. So it brings that awareness that I think is incredibly important for your progress, because as you bring that awareness, then in your daily life, you're going to notice things, and then you can start kind of copying or mimicking some of those subtle differences. So that's key to this program. Okay, so let's jump into more of the rhythm of English. So I've had a question from Dennis. Let me see if Dennis is even here. He brought up this question in one of the, I think it was just emailed to me, but he was asking about this, stressed words, and wondering if he was stressing words too much. And he can, in the 3 Easy Tips transcripts, he was saying, well, I couldn't really pick out any particular words that were stressed. He's like, even then the effect of the pause rather than stress was more effective. So what that was telling me is that there's a little bit of it's a little bit unclear as to what a stressed word sounds like. And so then it got him worried about, is he overstressing? How can you do, I do the up and down, rising and falling without sounding funny, or that I'm trying too hard. I think this is a very common thing to be worried about. And so I want us to go over an exercise that I tend to do with some of my live clients that goes over stress. So this speech is a TED Talk. So we go through a lot of TED Talks in this program, kind of later in the program especially, and especially in the alumni course. I want you to, like we were saying, the beginning of the program really brings your awareness to the sounds and the rhythm of English. And then we carry that into the alumni course, and I start picking out, okay, here, are you hearing some of these things in these speeches that they're using that rhythm, and they're using the pausing and stressing and everything to make their speeches more effective. So let's go through this speech, and hopefully I'll get some volunteers here in this exercise. But what I'm going to do, here, let me get, what I want to do is I'm going to go through this first paragraph, and I'm going to highlight some areas of rhythm. And then I would love for one of you to kind of practice using that rhythm. Okay, so in this speech, she starts off and she says, I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. Okay, so here's what's happening in the rhythm here. I have a confession to make. Okay, so she has, and in the alumni course, I go more into chunking. And basically what that is we have a message unit that is just kind of one complete sentence. So I have a confession to make. Okay, and then I kind of pause. That's the end of a sentence, but it's the end of an idea there too. So I have a confession to make has a bit of this like curved, I have a confession to make. Oh, is it going to let me curve? There we go. I have a confession to make. Confession is kind of the high point of that curve. That's where a little bit more of the stressed word is. I have a confession to make. You hear kind of going up and over that hill. I have a confession to make, but first, okay, and then I'm going to pause, but first, and I'm going to stress first, but first, I want you, and this is that compare, let me make this is where we're comparing, but first I want you to make a little confession to me. So when we're talking about sentence stress in the sentence stress lesson, I have that contrasting stress idea. Okay, and this is an example of it. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. Because if I just said, But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. It's not as effective at contrasting that as if I stress it and make that more pronounced. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, okay, so these are these tag questions, but first, in the past year, you kind of hear that rhythm. But first, in the past year, I want you, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Okay, so here's our message units. In the past year is one kind of message unit or chunk, what we call it. I want you to just raise your hand. Okay, I want you to just raise your hand. There's one chunk. And I'll put a little line here to kind of, we pause a little bit. There's no punctuation or anything, but that's the end of an idea. So I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. So that's that linking. We're kind of connecting all these words together. We're still emphasizing if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? Okay, so this is a yes or no question. So we're going to kind of raise it up, right? Anyone? All right, does anybody want to try this? Go ahead and raise your hand. Diane, I love it. Diane, you there?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you for volunteering. So I want you to go through this paragraph and kind of work on that stress that I just explained.
I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me.
Mm-hmm.
The past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you experienced relatively little stress. Anyone?
Good. Okay. Good. So that flow, when we're talking about the rhythm of English and that flow and fluency, a lot of that has to do with how well we're connecting within those chunks, right? I have a confession to make. Okay, so it's kind of making sure that all of that flows into one unit. And then, but first, I want you to make a little confession to me. So that's all kind of flowing together. So even do that with the focus kind of on linking and connecting it all together. Just do that. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. Do that sentence for me.
Which one? I'm
so
sorry.
Starting with, but first, I want you to make a little confession to me.
But first, I want you to make a little confession to me.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and then keep that flow going. In the past year.
In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you experience the relatively little stress.
Good. So start here and do if you've experienced relatively little stress. So kind of connect that all.
Experience relatively little stress.
Mm-hmm. So say that part for me, starting with if you've.
If you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone?
Yes, excellent. Okay, so what's going to happen here is that's why working on sounds and things kind of comes first, well, definitely comes first, is because if there's a word or a sound within these, it's going to be hard to connect it all, right? So there was a little bit of a stumble on you, probably because those contractions aren't as comfortable yet. Do you find that the contractions might be a little bit harder to know exactly how to pronounce it?
Yes, I thought I could be okay, but when I really started to speak, you kind of lost the tone.
Yeah, and it might be that you know how it's supposed to be pronounced, but your mouth is not, it's just not moving as fluently through those sounds as you want it to. And that's the difference of just kind of conceptually understanding versus training the muscles in your mouth to move in those specific ways. So that's excellent. Okay, so we're going to keep going. If you want to, I'm going to move on and have others volunteer, but if you want to do it again as we go along, then feel free to volunteer again, okay?
Okay, thanks.
Uh-huh. All right, let's see. I thought I saw another hand here. Was it Tian? Yeah, there we go. Tian. You there, Tian? Tian? Oh, looks like I'll leave your microphone unmuted while I go on, see if it works for you. And then Faye, let's go ahead and have you try it. Faye, go ahead. Oh, it looks like Faye, your microphone might not be working. Again, I'll leave you unmuted so that if you can get it working, then we can catch you. Okay, so.
Is it working now?
Oh, it is. Yep. So is this Faye or is this Tian?
Faye.
Faye. Okay. All right. Go ahead. Let's go ahead and do this first paragraph here. So I have a confession to make.
I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone?
Good job. Very good. Okay, so it's so interesting how if we just kind of read through that, if you just said, I have a confession to make, but first I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone? Okay, so if I do that with a very flat intonation, you can kind of see the difference of just, it doesn't engage, it doesn't excite, it's not that dynamic or interesting. But what you just did with your stress and your, those sounds and the rhythm of that's what engages. That's what's going to help, your listener really get into it. Okay. So that was great. Good job. And the only thing, go ahead and do that paragraph again and just kind of a little, even the second time through, it'll probably flow a little bit more. So do that again.
Okay. I have a confession to make. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. Anyone?
Good. So just like I was talking about before, there's kind of this like contraction here that, you can stumble on a little bit, and then it kind of keeps you from having that flow from there. So what happens is as you practice and as you come across, certain phrases or something like that it's like, oh, I kind of got caught on this and then it threw off my rhythm. Then just repeating those phrases, repeating that sentence and training your mouth to move through that is really the training that's needed to keep that fluency going. Okay, so you might have a speech like this or something that you're reading like this that you might say 20 times, and that's what you see with great speakers. Is I've been kind of researching, some of their greatest speakers in history, and it doesn't just happen. They spent a lot of time rehearsing and practicing and training their mouth to move fluently and to get that stress and that rhythm and that dynamic rhythm to their voice. Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to go a little bit, and if anybody has any other questions, Rania, let's actually say, let's jump into your question real quick, because I just want to make sure we get all the questions that you're writing out before we keep going with the rhythm. So Rania, let me unmute you. Rania, you there?
Yes, Annie, how are you?
Good. Okay, so you're asking about water. When I say water, as there's kind of WATER, but we all say with a D. So water kind of becomes water, right?
I hear a native speaker say water, like R and ER, and daughter, better.
Yes.
Sometimes I hear it's not D.
You hear it more as an R, water.
Water, daughter.
Yeah, so
I
I'm
don't know.
hearing
It's different from, yeah.
daughter. So what I'm hearing from you is like daughter, daughter. So there's daughter, water, um, butter. Butter is another one. It's very common. Butter. But you're not hearing the D, you're hearing something else.
Uh, I hear like R instead of D, R-E-R, like daughter, E-R-E-R, and water, W-A-R-E-R.
So Warer. So if we were doing this, it would sound like warer, warer, warer. But if we're doing water, water, that tongue's coming up for
Yeah.
that come more of a D. So this is warer. Is that what you're hearing? Warer?
I don't know how to write it, but I can say water.
Yeah.
I say R instead of D. When I say now, water.
So you're
Can you
doing
hear
a D.
it?
Yeah, but you're doing a D.
R,
You're just getting that R right after it. Water. Water.
water. Okay.
Yeah, so I'm hearing this from you. That's this right, this second one. This is what I'm hearing from you. Water.
Okay.
So say this for me.
But actually, I didn't say D. Actually, I didn't say D. I say R. But it's I don't know. It's hard to explain.
So
It's
it
water and daughter.
okay. So what might be happening is because you might be doing what we call a retroflexed R. And basically what a retroflexed R is instead of having the R down, what's happening is your tongue is coming up and touching the roof of your mouth for the R. So what feels like just another R for you is sounding like a D for us.
Okay.
That's funny. So water, and usually I can hear a little bit more of a like where your tongue is up, and I don't hear that much for you. So I'm just curious, kind of how much of your tongue is down or up. But water, so there's what your tongue is coming up and hitting the roof of your mouth for that D, or what you kind of perceive as the R. But that's how a D is pronounced, is it comes up and it taps the roof of your mouth. Da 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 da.
Yeah.
Whereas da 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 da, and that's what I'm hearing there. Whereas if you're going if your tongue is coming up a little bit, you're going to have that same sensation of, which as I'm hearing it, I'm just hearing more of a DER from you. And that retroflex,
I do understand.
Yeah, no, I understand, because the retroflex R can get tricky, because as I worked with students, that retroflex R with the R kind of raised up, as far as how it sounds, a lot of students can get it sounding just like an American R. So I say, don't worry about it.
Okay.
That's fine, because if it sounds right, then you got it, we're not going to mess with that. But if it's sounding like and it's kind of like this trapped sound, and that R is coming up too much, then I start saying, no, we gotta tweak that. We gotta work on that a little bit. But yours is not sounding off. It's sounding quite, it's sounding like what I would want it to be. Okay.
Hey,
hopefully that makes sense. All right, thanks.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Faye, I wasn't sure if that was Faye. Did you want to try the paragraph? Is that what you were asking about? So I
already practiced.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay, sorry. I'm getting Faye and Finn. I'm getting you guys confused. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Okay, ban and man. Ban and man. Let's see. Do we pronounce them in the same way? Ratnakar. I'm going to unmute you. Ratnakar, your microphone might let's see, Ratnikar, are you there?
Yeah.
Hello. Okay, so ban and man is what you're asking about. Ban and man. Do we pronounce them the same way? So no, these would be different. Ban and man. The difference is that first sound. But they do, both B and M have the same mouth closure, but the difference is the way that it's produced. So ba has more of a burst sound. Ba. So if we say ban, so do that for me. Ban.
Bien.
Ban. And then if we do man, it has more of a, it has closed off. It's a continuous sound, but it's not that burst sound. Man.
Man.
So do that again. Man.
Man.
So do ban, man.
Man. Okay.
There was a ban on the man that crossed the street. Do that for me.
There is a pian on the man crossing the street.
Yes. Okay. So there's a difference there when we have that burst versus just the continuous. Ban on the man.
Ban on the man.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm hearing the difference. Are you hearing the difference?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's just like bang.
Yeah. So the trick for you is just making sure that that B has more of a burst. Ba, ba, ba. Same with the p, 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 like pan. Pan. Say that for me. Pan.
Pan.
Okay, so that's where you're gonna want to get pan. Say that again. Pan with a P. Pan.
Pan.
Okay. So one trick is with a piece of paper. With a piece of paper, if you say we want to get ban, the B and the P to sound different. So ba 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 ba. If we say the B sound, ba 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 ba, with a piece of paper in front of our mouth, it's not going to move. But if we put a piece of paper in front of our mouth, and can you see my video right now?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so watch this. Pan, pan,
Pan.
pan, pan. So get a piece of paper, just any kind of scrap piece of paper, and put it in front of your mouth. And if you're saying the P sound correct, that piece of paper will move. Pan, 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 pan. The reason is because the P has a burst of air, and that's what creates that voiceless sound. Pan, 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 pan. But the yeah, there you go. Yeah, pan.
Pan.
So you're getting that P sound. If you don't get that burst of air, it's going to sound ban, 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 ban. Okay. Ban. So that's something to practice. And in the bonus lessons, I have a kind of a worksheets and practice exercises with the P sound. And you'll want to do that and make sure that you're getting that burst of air. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. All right, good. Okay, well, we're about out of time. I can go more into the rhythm. If you have questions about rhythm and want to do that more in the next webinar, we can do more of that and kind of go through this exercise where we do more of like show the dynamics of speech. I'll bring this to the next webinar, and we can kind of do a little bit more of that depending on what other questions we have. Just by raise of hand, is there anyone, like how many of you are thinking, okay, yeah, this exercise with the rhythm, that's something that I'm really needing to work on? I just want to get an idea of, kind of your level of where you feel like, oh, I really need to be working on this, or I really need to be working more on the sounds. So kind of use that raise a hand icon, and let me just get a gauge from all of you, kind of where you're wanting to, who's kind of wanting to do more of this rhythm exercises. Okay, so there's a good amount of you. So be sure to come to the next webinar, and during that time, from now until the end, or now until the next webinar, kind of try that out. There's these speeches that on TED.com, and depending on where you are in the program, I give you a lot of speeches to kind of practice, but dissecting them and kind of saying, okay, where are the message units? Where should I be linking and connecting all of these together, and where should I be breaking? So that's a big part of that, like chunking or connecting, is that within those chunks, make sure you're getting it nice and smooth. So if you come across a situation right here where you're like, okay, that really needs to be nice and smooth, but I keep getting stuck on that contraction or that word or that sound, then go back, say it over and over again until you can get your muscles in your mouth moving through that sound fluently, and then practice getting that fluent movement. So if you're like, I have a confession to make, I have a confession to make. Up and over the hill, up and over the hill. But first, I want you to make a little confession to me, okay? Contrasting. In the past year, I want you to just raise your hand if you've experienced relatively little stress. If you've experienced relatively little stress. So even me, I stumbled on that experienced and relatively, kind of moving between those two. So what I do is then go back. If you've experienced relatively little stress, and it feels like you're pulling a string, and you have to make that continuous. If you've experienced relatively little stress, because even if you're slowing it down, but you're all getting those movements nice and fluid from one to the next, that's going to help your mouth get that coordination. Okay, so do a little bit of practice of that this week. Make sure that you're really getting those sounds and working on those sounds, because if you're coming across too many sounds that you're struggling to get through, then that rhythm is going to be tricky. So you really have to kind of conquer some of those sounds before that rhythm is going to get as smooth as you want it to be. But that is the next step, and you'll want to get to that point. And I see that with my students over and over again, is that once we're able to really conquer some of those sounds, make sure your mouth is getting to the position that it needs to for some trouble sounds, like sometimes it's the R, a lot of times it's the TH sound, some of these sounds, then we can really start moving into that rhythm and get that rhythm sounding nice and smooth through those sounds, or through those sentences and those message units. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. We'll definitely go through this more next webinar. But thank you for your questions and your comments. And let's see, these were just some other ideas. But feel free to contact me with questions. When it's specific things that we can work, that it kind of requires us to work on it, sometimes I'll recommend that you come to the webinar. But just kind of conceptual questions, a lot of times I can just answer through email or through the questions boxes or the comments boxes at the end of the questions. So we're definitely here to support you and help you through this program. If you're wanting a little bit more personalized or customized attention, the Plus and the Premier package are excellent for that. You get a lot of time with your trainer to really kind of fine tune those areas. So if that's a possibility, definitely go look at that. But I will see you next webinar. Thank you all for coming and for your great questions. We'll see you next time. Thanks.